Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News or Thinking Outside the Blocks with our friend Charting Man Dan. How are you today, Dan?
Good, Alex. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks, mate. Today we wanted to dive into some medical cannabis, talking about plants for their medicinal purposes and how they come to market and that whole industry. So, have you got any thoughts on this as someone that's watched that marijuana stock space for a while? And I know you got friends and family in this space and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, really, I am into stocks 9 years ago because I read The Emperor Wears No Clothes, which is a book all about industrial hemp and marijuana. So, essentially, I read that book and it points out the absurdities of why it's illegal, all the useful cases. So, I read that and said, wow, CBD, industrial hemp, this is the future. I want to figure out how to make money off of this and be able to profit when it does start to see the sentiment shift. And that led me to stocks. So, it's a very near and dear subject to my heart. And it's something that in the US, we're starting to see, the slow snowball gather momentum in terms of state by state turning over. Just in terms of 10 years ago, we never would have thought we would be this far along compared to where we are right now. But that being said, we still have a very long way to go.
Yeah, and again, I was watching all those documentaries when I was at uni and watching these ones about hemp and medical marijuana. I think the big benefits are anxiety, pain, especially for epilepsy. So it's not just that THC and getting you high, it's the cannabinoids that have a real medical benefit. But I want to talk today about why it takes so long to get something to market and the way the medical industry has become, where they need patents. They need to be able to profit off these things because these clinical trials take years to do, and the estimates are millions or $1 billion to get a drug to market. So if there's something that's in nature, and this goes for all, I guess, psychedelics and all these things that are just now starting to come back into this clinical trial phase, unless they can profit off it, they're just not going to put the time and effort into any of these plants.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way that it goes. We saw with the pharmaceutical companies, there are certain pharmaceutical companies that'll buy up other ones. And then if, the research and development aspect of that company is not profitable, they'll just cut it. And so they're not doing any innovative research because that's not driving the bottom line, which is profit. So it's a wide, range. Pretty much if you're a public company, the bottom line is your number one goal is profit. So you have all these companies that are trying to go for profit. And of course, you have the government itself, where it's money that is the driving force behind it all. So these things that occur in nature, obviously people have been using marijuana for a very long time. And we need science to catch up. We need to know, okay, what dosage do I need to best cure this ailment? And that is going to go a long way. And also the fact that because it's been illegal since the 30s, we don't have the information from research. We're decades and decades behind because we have not been researching it in clinical studies to get the information that we need on exact dosages for different kinds of ailments. We pretty much, all the different cannabinoids, aside from THC and CBD, there's so many other ones that we're only scratching the surface on, and there's so much more to learn from there. I know that you come from the pharmaceutical side of things yourself. Do you find that in Australia that people are still very resistant to marijuana?
Yeah, there's certain places where it almost goes, they turn a blind eye to it, but it's still illegal for all intents and purposes. But the thing that I think we need to have in place is some sort of common sense clause, where if we know something's been around for thousands of years, why does it need to go through the same rigorous 10 years to find out whether or not it's safe? I think we need to be able to bypass a lot of those processes and just get to these standardization, as you say. So we know what dose we can give certain people, but a lot of the time, the way nature works with the way it produces chemical compounds and so on, it's a lot more in sync with your body, with nature. So we don't get these extremes compared to these lab-made chemicals. Like we see fentanyl and a drop can give you an overdose and that sort of thing. So nature tends to have these balances when you're ingesting mushrooms, marijuana, kratom leaf, all these sort of things. It's very hard to, I guess, overdo it if you're producing and taking the way nature intended it.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's the companies that concentrate it down and try and get it in its, small dose form to be able to mass produce it. I do like the way that, Canada obviously has legalized recreational marijuana, and the way that they're approaching it is saying, okay, very clearly, this is not an extremely harmful substance and it has many benefits. Here you go. And giving it to the people. And now, the science is going to come after that in terms of pinpointing the exact medical uses for it. So we'll see. I don't think the US is going to have that same approach. I think it's going to be, again, it's always people lining their pockets. It's the reason it was made illegal in the 30s. It was the different industries that were threatened by industrial hemp and by marijuana that made sure to make it illegal. And it's going to have to be the right incentive, with dollars being the bottom line, to lead it forward from here.
Yeah, and it's a little bit like crypto, where we see some jurisdictions taking really friendly approaches to security tokens or whatever. It's the same with this industry. I just think Australia is so backwards; they're going to get left behind because they want to take this authoritarian stance that drugs are bad and whatnot. But the other thing I wanted to talk about was doctor and patient outcomes. And back in the day, healthcare was about healing and getting your body better. And now if you say to your doctor, well, how many people have you ever cured and do you get better? And they sort of think about it, and 90% of the drugs we dispense are for, heart disease, blood pressure, cholesterol, all of which, or 90% of the time, you can get better with healthy diet, lifestyle, and exercise. And people are just on these pills. They're a permanent profit for the company for the rest of their lives. Whereas a lot of these other drugs are hopefully healing these conditions a lot cheaper or getting people better. And that's another thing that a lot of people need to have their heads around, I think.
Yeah, it's this goes back to, I fortunately don't have a lot of experience recently with Western medicine because I've been healthy, but I did have my experience was terrible, just in the sense that I had something on my arms, just a rash type thing that would come up and it would be itchy and there'd be bumps, and I would go in and try and get it fixed, and they would give me steroid cream every single time and say, oh, that's poison ivy. I know what poison ivy is. It's not poison ivy. But it took so long for me. I had to do all the research. My buddy said, hey, maybe it's not something external that's causing this. Maybe it's something internal. Maybe it's something you're eating. So taking that little seed that he planted in my brain, I started to observe my body, this mind-body connection in terms of our body telling us things, but it's up to our minds to observe these things and then, make note of it. So through elimination diets and through all these things, I could find out that if I drink a certain amount of alcohol in a certain amount of time, my skin reacts to it. It's very straightforward. But Western medicine, they just wanted to treat my symptoms, not treat the cause of it. They never asked me what my diet was once in any of the appointments I went to the dermatologist or the doctor in general. And it was just so disheartening I'm an expert in the symptoms of my body. I observe it every single day, and they didn't want to hear a word of what I had to say about all the observations that I had made about myself. So it is the kind of thing where, I learned that, you have to do it for yourself to a certain degree. And I think that's, what we see great populations, large populations doing with these natural substances.
I was exactly the same with eczema or skin conditions at uni, and you couldn't get a straight answer from doctors, and you go do your own research, watch your own documentaries, and as you say, things like alcohol and sugar can inflame your liver, and then they get less good at clearing a lot of the proteins, like the allergens in dairy foods and gluten, and then it's a combination of, again, diet and lifestyle, but you'll never hear that from a doctor. And a lot of people in the pharmacy, we did used to be able to cure their eczema and skin conditions with just those diet lifestyle changes, getting their gut really healthy with probiotics and so on. But if you go to the doctor, they'll just throw a stronger steroid cream at you, which is really disheartening.
Yeah, certainly don't want to knock all doctors. There's great doctors out there. Western medicine is, awesome for a whole bunch of ailments and saves lives all the time. But the one area where it does fall short very clearly, in my opinion, is what we just mentioned.
Yeah, and a lot of the time those doctors are very smart people that were the top of their class, and again, that can be a product of the system. So they were the top of their class in all their studies at school. They read all the books, and all the time it's the literature that started to steer people in the wrong direction. Whereas if you study medicine in an Eastern country, the literature you read and the expert that you become is very different. And the final thing I wanted to mention was these patents and quality of life versus quantity of life. And again, a lot of the focus for research and development for these companies now are cancer drugs and they'll show that they can beat or extend life for a few months. And that's a profit for the company because it's such a high cost item. And when you really put things into measurable terms, are you really getting a better quality of life by going through that process that might give you an extra 3 months? And that's where it's a profit, but is it good patient outcome? Again, that's where I think the real imbalance is.
Yeah, there's an example that I had with issues in my my conscious with patents was GWPH, which is one of the leaders in the current space for marijuana. They make the epilepsy drug, and they have patents on it. And it felt really dirty for me to invest long term in a company that's able to patent, these natural compounds and pretty much inhibit other companies from doing work with them, and which could potentially benefit humanity. So it's this constant, balance of pros and cons between, we want these companies to develop these drugs, we want the information from the clinical studies, but we want, it to be for the good of the people and not for the bottom line of profit. And that's, the balance of capitalism that we see constantly.
Yeah, and it is a tough one because we are seeing that swing back to research from the 60s and 70s. We are seeing MDMA trials, psilocybin, medical marijuana, which is awesome. I love seeing those studies come out now. But if they go through, let's hope that they don't get patented and cornered, as you say.
Yep.
Any final thoughts then, Dan? That's been a great conversation. I'd love to read everyone's comments below, what they want us to talk about and explore, because there's so many ways we could take this sort of conversation.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it does tie into different ways that we can trade and invest in these things, because they are, these new industries that are popping back up. Obviously, they're not new. They've been around for thousands of years, but floodgates are opening back up, and it's interesting to watch it all unfold.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us today, guys, and thank you, Dan.
Have a good day.
Cheers.